Hey friends, I wanted to talk about today the strange times that we are in when the price of everything is increasing substantially, but the cost of money is decreasing or the all-time historical kind of low, and why that paradox matters to you in business or even in your personal finances. So one thing that is funny, if you see some of the memes out there, is the lumber prices. So the lumber prices are have increased substantially in the last year, and a little bit of that is supply chain disruption. And the other influencer of that is interest rates are low, so construction is high, as well as the other things that are disrupting the supply chain. So I was curious, like, what thing in history are we repeating here? Because history usually repeats itself, and if we didn't learn our lessons before, we're going to relearn them in another way. And thinking about what market alignments do we have going on here? So thinking of if we are on the beginning part of a very hard market correction, like what happened in the 80s is that part of it. And maybe we have to go way back to the 30s and the roaring 30s, or the roaring 20s, right before the Great Depression, and what was going on in business and in our society at that time. And maybe we need to look that far back. But the data that we have is not that old. That is not that old. We could dig in deep if we wanted to. But let's look at lumber prices. So back in the 80s, you can see, I don't know, we get all these ads as well, but back in the 80s, lumber prices went down and down and down, and this is when interest rates were going up, and then it started to come back a little bit. So it's really interesting to watch it go up and down with the economic times and what was going on. Pretty stable for many years as far as that goes, but let's hop into what's been going on in the last few quarters. So what this is doing here, this net change is the last 52 weeks and the net change. So you see percentages in here: 100%, 250, up to 350% increase from 52 weeks earlier. So the lumber prices are increasing substantially, or a lot higher than they used to be. But what does that mean for you, and whether or not you should, because invested, that just means whether your rent is going up or securing a space. If you aren't locked into a lease, that lease is now going to be more expensive because the cost to build is more expensive. The homes are going to be more expensive because they're more expensive to build, and that price always get passed on to the user. So there's two influencers that are really pushing some of this into high, not only in lumber, steel, and everything is trending that way too, but the buzz seems to be around lumber, so that's why I'm talking about that specifically. But there's two things that influence the higher demand. One is the interest rates. So this is the federal fund rate, which then also influences, this is kind of the federal government's lever on interest. Then this influences all the other interest rates. So this is I wanted to go back in the same kind of time period. So here you can see in the 80s, in the early 80s, when lumber prices were dipping, interest rates were really high, right? So the demand for lumber went down because interest rates were high. So there wasn't really a supply issue, it was a more demand. So if I have to borrow money at 18% for my house, I'm probably not going to build a house. I'm just going to live where I'm living, because that's a lot of money, especially in today's concept of how much interest rates really are. And we can see that they've been historically going down. There's a couple little spikes in here since that time frame back in the 80s, and all the way down to where we're at today, which is basically a zero Fed funds rate, which is interesting. So the interest rates are really low, but also we have this situation right now because of COVID that our unemployment rate is really high. And not only because businesses are making decisions, but also because our legislatures are making decisions to help fund unemployment, which now makes it easier, or you bring home more money to your family if you file for unemployment than if you're working, if you're in that $15 per hour wage bracket. So if you work $15 an hour, work for 40 hours a week, $15 an hour, you'd be making $600 a week. Right now, if you were to file for unemployment, you'd make $64 a week. So they're incentivizing those lower paying jobs to file for unemployment, which then drives the price of those goods that come from manual labor up. So that is what's influencing the market today. That's what's influencing the price increase in lumber, as well as some of the other factors that are going on. So whether it's lumber, whether it's the milk, the gas you put in your car, things are going up. So rapid inflation because of some of those factors. Now, the experts and the economists are going to tell you that it's hundreds of things, and that is completely accurate as far as what influences the market. But those are a couple of the big things. So the labor and the interest rates. So that's a little tidbit on what's going on with these expensive goods. So it doesn't mean that it's bad time to buy, because if you have to borrow in one scenario or another scenario, money's never been cheaper than it is today.